Well, a hearty good evening to everybody. Welcome to tonight's City Council meeting. Glad to have you all here. It is Tuesday, October 8th, and this is the Sioux Falls City Council meeting. We'll start our meeting by introducing you to your City Council.
Council members Aguilar. Here. Anderson.
Here.
Entenmann.
Here.
Erpenbach. Here. Jameson. Karski.
Present.
Rolfing. Staggers.
Present.
Very good, thank you. We are so blessed, as we always do. We start our meeting with a blessing, with an invocation. Tonight we've got Care Pastor Carmen Van Scoik of Celebrate Church in Sioux Falls. And there are so many churches making a difference in our great town, and Celebrate is truly a master at it. And so we're blessed to have you here, Pastor Van Scoik. Thank you. The pastor is going to lead us in prayer. We'd ask you to stand. And then after the pastor is done, we'll then continue with our Pledge of Allegiance. Pastor Van Scoik, welcome.
Thank you, Mayor. It's truly an honor to be here this evening. Let's go to our God in prayer. Heavenly Father, this evening we thank you that as citizens of this great country, we have the privilege of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. We thank you for our country. And we pray that you would give wisdom and courage to those in our federal government, that they would work together in the spirit of cooperation for what is best for us as a nation. Tonight, we specifically come to you on behalf of the people of Sioux Falls, that you would look favorably upon those who have gathered here in this room, and specifically those in leadership and governing positions. I pray for our mayor, Mike Huther, that you would bless him and his leadership. I pray for your favor upon him as he leads our city. I pray the same for Jim, our chair, Dean, our vice chair, and for Sue, Kenny, Michelle, Greg, Rex, and Kermit. Give them wisdom and courage to do what is both right and fair. Bless each of them as they serve the people of Sioux Falls. It's in the name of Jesus Christ that we pray these things. Amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Now you can just slip out that direction. Thank you.
Well, a hearty good evening to all of you. Welcome. It's so great to have you here. And we do have some special proclamations. And the first one is a proclamation for White Cane Day. And if any representatives would want to stand, join me. I'd certainly appreciate it. And again, welcome. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being here. The proclamation reads, whereas the white cane is a simple yet effective tool that enables citizens with blindness and visual impairments throughout Sioux Falls and the nation to enjoy greater independence and freedom of movement while allowing them to navigate safely through their environment, avoiding physical barriers and hazards. Whereas the white cane is also a symbol of dignity, independence, and determination that serves as a tangible reminder that individuals who are blind or have impaired eyesight possess not only the desire, but also the ability to lead full, independent, and productive lives. Whereas the white cane has the right of way in traffic when a blind person crosses an intersection, and that motorists are to pay special attention and to stop when they see someone with a white cane at that intersection. Whereas the annual observance of White Cane Day emphasizes the need for all citizens to be aware of the presence of blind persons in their communities and to work together to keep the streets, highways, sidewalks, walkways, public buildings and facilities, and places of public accommodation and amusement safe and functional for the blind. Whereas the 2013 celebration of White Cane Day provides a unique opportunity for the citizens of Sioux Falls to renew their commitment to eliminating physical and attitudinal barriers that continue to hinder the full participation of blind persons in our society. Now, therefore, I'm Mike Huther, the mayor of the city of Sioux Falls, and I do hereby proclaim October 12th, 2013 as White Cane Day in Sioux Falls, and I encourage all citizens to recognize the white cane as a symbol of dignity, independence, and yes, determination, and to follow the white cane laws. Congratulations, and thanks for being here with us tonight. I also have a second proclamation, Disability Employment Awareness Month. Would those folks please come forward? And again, welcome. The proclamation reads, whereas the Congress by joint resolution has designated October of each year as National Disability Employment Awareness Month. Whereas the purpose of this month is to celebrate the many and varied contributions of America's workers with disabilities and educate the public about disability employment issues. Whereas approximately 15%, that's 15% of the city's population has disabilities, and each is a family member, friend, neighbor, employee, and customer. Whereas all persons with disabilities have the right and responsibility to be active, contributing members of our society. Whereas workplaces welcoming of all talents, of all people, including people with disabilities, are a crucial part of our efforts to build an inclusive community and strong economy. Now, therefore, I, Mike Huther, Mayor of the City of Sioux Falls, do hereby proclaim October 2013 as Disability Employment Awareness Month in Sioux Falls, and encourage all residents, businesses, organizations, and government agencies to observe this month by bringing down barriers and by supporting initiatives and activities that support and promote providing employment opportunities for people with disabilities. Thank you so much for being here, and keep it going. Thank you. Well, thank you. We'll now move to our consent agenda. Councilor, any comments?
Move to approve, Karski.
Second, Anderson.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
Excuse me, I need to recluse myself.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Entman is going to recuse himself. There has been a motion to approve our consent agenda by Councilor Karski. It was seconded, I think, by Councilor Anderson, Jr. Is there any discussion? A roll call vote, please.
Councilors Karski,
Yes.
Staggers,
Yes.
Aguilar,
Yes.
Anderson,
Yes.
Erpenbach.
Yes.
That is passed 5-0. Thank you. We'll now move to our regular agenda. Council, any changes?
Move for approval, Anderson.
Second, Erpenbach.
Councilor Anderson, Jr. has made a motion to approve our agenda tonight, seconded by Councilor Erpenbach. If there is no discussion, a roll call vote, please.
Councilors Karski,
Yes.
Staggers,
Yes.
Aguilar,
Yes.
Anderson,
Yes.
Entman,
Yes.
Erpenbach.
Yes.
Thank you. That is passed 6-0. Again, welcome to our meeting tonight. Great to have such a good crowd here. We love it. This is a great opportunity for you to engage the council. If you'd like, come forward. We'd ask you just introduce yourself to the people of our town. And if you could keep your comments to 5 minutes or less, we'd appreciate that as well. Would anybody want to address the council? Welcome.
Tim Stanga. Wanted to come here last week, but somebody started my house on fire, so couldn't make it. Thank God for insurance. They'll pay out good. One thing I want to remind people, the city council and the mayor, after the budget meeting, I talked to a lot of people. And what they see on TV, they're not very impressed on how people are being treated and how things are being done. And it was especially for Kermit on when he brought up the CIP. A lot of people don't know what the CIP is in town and in Sioux Falls. That's for the city council and the mayor's office to educate people in Sioux Falls to let them know what is in the CIP, what the CIP even means, and how far the CIP goes out. Because a lot of the projects in town are done through the CIP. So Kermit, keep bringing it out because people need to be educated. Another question, and I don't know, just something to throw out. You drive around town and there's so much curb and gutter that are missing. It's on not only secondary streets, but it's major streets. And I'm just wondering if we got money in the CIP to be fixing all of the curbs and gutters. Just drive around town and look, and there's curb and gutter all over that are gone. Some of these streets are terrible to drive down, and if you drive down a lot of them, there's weeds that are growing up between the curb and the street itself. And in my neighborhood, if you drive through that, it's through the whole neighborhood. Now, I don't know if it's the homeowner's responsibility to get rid of the weeds between the curb and gutter and the street, or if that's the city's job. But we got to do something about it because in my neighborhood, it's pretty bad. Thanks.
Thank you. Is there anybody else who wants to address the council? Welcome.
Scott Arisman. Sorry, Scott Arisman, Sioux Falls. If you've been reading the newspapers and the media, you'd think that the city is just rolling in money. We got $10 million coming from the federal government. And I'll have to admit I was wrong. When the city council voted to pay for the levies up front, I told several councilors not to do that. I said the federal government will never pay you back, ever. They did. It's pretty cool. So why is the federal government paying us back? Well, I don't know. They're paying us back for the levies that we borrowed the money for. So why all of a sudden do we think this is just some pile of money that we can spend on whatever we want to? Now, I will agree if we take the $10 million and spend it on actual infrastructure projects, that's a good thing. Another option is putting it into a savings or investment account and then paying it off in 2018. But remember, I want to tell the public this, remember the last time when we had a little extra money sitting in the bank account for the city, we bought a film projector. So I just want to remind you that this money is because of the levies, and it should either be spent on actual infrastructure or spent back paying back the loan, not on anything else. Thank you.
Thank you. Folks, anybody else? Well, thank you very much for being here. We appreciate it. We'll now move on to item 11.
First reading, an ordinance of the City of Sioux Falls, South Dakota, amending the Code of Ordinances of the city by adding a subchapter to Chapter 37 titled Tax Incremental Districts.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm Brent O'Neill with the Community Development Department, here to talk about an ordinance that we're proposing with tax increment financing in our city. Just to give you a real quick overview of our process for looking at this, we go back at least a year, maybe even longer than that, but certainly in January of 2012, we had an open work session to talk about TIF in general and some things that might be desired for changes, and several meetings ensued after that, working with the council, the school district, the county, etc., our planning commission, our development community, legal experts researching other cities, and have gotten to the point we are today. As we were looking at this process, two things came to mind. One, we wanted to proactively review TIF in Sioux Falls, and more importantly, we wanted to be responsive to the comments that we hear from everybody, again, on TIF in Sioux Falls. With that, probably one theme that emerged was just the level of information that's disseminated and how that's communicated. So we're, as a department, committed to making a few changes to improve the communication. The first is we're going to provide advance notice to elected officials, and that certainly means the City Council as the final decision maker on TIF, but it also means our friends at the county, the school district, and the Planning Commission. We're also going to make sure that material about TIF, the process, how it works, how it gets to the City Council, et cetera, is made available primarily through our website, but we'll have copies of that as well. But the intent there is just to make sure that our process is well known, it's consistent, people understand how it works, potential applicants understand what their process would look like as they apply. And then the last thing we'll mention on communication is there are going to be 2 additional opportunities for review above and beyond these other things. The first, at the Planning Commission's request, have asked to see TIF proposals a second time, so they have time between getting the lump of information and then the point they're asked to make a decision. And likewise with the council. The council has typically approved it by resolution on a single hearing, and so we're committed to bringing it twice. One, to give you guys the information ahead of a decision, but also to give you the opportunity to ask us for questions or ask us in the week or 2 in between meetings to provide you additional information. But what we're here tonight on is an ordinance that does a few things. The 2 primary is it invokes a standard application. Right now our application process is very informal, very inconsistent. And so just having a standard application is going to bring consistency and clarity to our process. That application, will include things like a summary of the project, the financing, and those projections that go into making the project. What is the schedule for completion? How does the TIF look over time? Who's involved in the project? Who are the owners involved in the development? So that is point number 1. And point number 2 is the city charging an application fee for considering TIF districts. That application fee we're proposing is $2,500. That is based on really 3 things: research of other communities, kind of an evaluation of our own staff time and costs, indirect costs that go into it, as well as a bit of a vetting with some in the community that are potential applicants, trying to find a number that was palatable to all. The second part of that is on an ongoing basis. The city does again have costs of administering the TIF over, potentially 15 or 20 years. There's things change as far as how disbursements of that TIF are made. It does involve some level of detail on the staff's part. So that is again a fee trying to make sure that the city is properly compensated for those costs that it incurs. And then the third, we do have external costs from time to time that primarily revolve around legal fees, but it also can include any other third-party review or assistance that we're looking at to verify the financials or verify the legality or just confirm some things that we need to know to bring forward a confident proposal. All 3 of those are considered eligible TIF reimbursable items in a TIF, so any TIF going forward will build these costs in and can be reimbursed to the developer. That's the proposal that we have in front of you, and we'd be happy to answer any questions.
Well, Brent, thank you very much. Folks, this is a first reading, so we go directly to the council. Council, any questions or comments? Councilor Staggers?
Yes. Last week, I think probably many of us on the City Council were surprised when we found out that in a TIF there was the facade easement program. Is that also still going to be the case with this new ordinance, that we can still have the facade easement program in the TIF?
Sure. The facade easement, as it was included in what would have been TIF 8 at the time and ultimately TIF 12, is an eligible cost under state statute, and that's primarily the driver of our TIF in Sioux Falls. It's really, like a lot of things, a subjective call of the council. We'll, if, for example, facade easement was proposed to be included, I mean, that would be part of the project plan. It would be put before you, and you'd have the decision to approve it at that point.
Yeah, I think that some of us would not want to have the facade easement program at all. Can you just give a few examples of things that cannot be in a TIF? It seems like what we're getting is just about anything can be in a TIF, including that facade easement program.
Mm-hmm.
What cannot be in a program?
Probably the best thing I can tell you is what is in a TIF. Capital costs in general, real estate assembly, financing costs, administrative costs, blight removal costs, things that are, adverse conditions. I don't have that full list in front of me, but we can provide it, or we can look for a better way of sharing that information with you.
Yeah, if you could tell us things that can't be in it.
I can give you one example or two examples. One specifically, residential structures cannot have money directly put into the sticks, the siding, the windows, the materials of a building.
That's with the home. You said residential, right?
Right,
Okay.
right. I mean, that's a specific extent,
Okay.
disallowance in state statute.
Okay. Thank you.
Brent, by the next meeting, if you would just provide the council those items that it does include, I think that'd be great.
Sure.
Yeah, thank you. Councilor Anderson Jr.
Thank you, Mayor. That was one of the things I was going to ask for. As I was also one of the council members who was quite surprised that we were using TIF for the facade program, because we also just approved a budget that has a facade program. So now by using TIF, you doubled the facade program in the budget, and then you just doubled it again by using TIF. And that's a great concern, because now instead of 200,000, I don't see where that TIF money is reducing the TIF program in any way. Sure. So definitely I would like to see a list of things that would qualify for TIF, because my understanding of TIF was that it was only to be used for extraordinary repairs or things to develop. Similar to the Costco property, it had environmental issues.
Right.
And now we've widened this, I think, without a really good explanation. I'm not saying it was hidden from us, but I just don't remember that in the presentation when we did TIF. It was 18?
TIF 8.
TIF 8, and then,
Okay.
yeah.
What was the year of TIF 8?
TIF 8 was 2007, I believe.
Okay. So that does concern me, that we're expanding this into the TIF area, and, you just made a statement also that it isn't used on residential. Well, if it's not used on residential for sticks and mortar, it shouldn't be used on commercial for the same thing. So, thank you.
Councilor, were you a councilor in 2007? Yeah, I didn't think so. Yeah, I wasn't around either. Very good. Thank you, Councilor.
Yeah.
Councilor Urbanbach.
Thank you. Darren, could you go back to the first slide that you had up there? The one about communications. I'm looking at the actual changes to the ordinance, and I'm not seeing that timeline for communicating with the Planning Commission and with Council. Is that going to be like an administrative rule, or is that going to be spelled out in the ordinance? How's that going to work?
Yeah, it was our intent to keep that schedule as open, as flexible as possible. It was, as we were working on it, we wanted to keep it as concise as possible, but we know that there's going to be times where, with conversations with an applicant, that it might stretch out. There's also going to be times where there's a sense of urgency and everyone feels it's the right thing to do to, accelerate our time frame. So it was our intent to keep it sort of intentionally administrative, so that we always have that ability to not be bound by a rigid timeline, have the flexibility to go long or short if we need to.
But Planning Commission asked you to talk to them about it twice. Give us a month in between. Is Council going to get a couple of times to think about it as well?
That's fully our intent. 2 meetings. With the Planning Commission, the reason the month in between is they only meet monthly.
Meet once a month.
In our case with the council, it'll be our proposal that, just at least 2 meetings, whether it's a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks, but that you would certainly get an opportunity to review it twice.
Good, thank you.
Well, Councilors, very good questions. Thank you very much. And this will come back potentially, if you want. I don't know if anybody would want to set a date of hearing and second reading for Tuesday, October 15th for this item.
Second, Entman.
Councilor Anderson Jr., thank you. He has made that motion. It was seconded by Councilor Entman. If there is no further discussion, a roll call vote, please.
Councilors Karski,
Yes.
Staggers,
Yes.
Aguilar,
Yes.
Anderson,
Yes.
Entman,
Yes.
Erpenbach.
Yes.
Thank you. That is passed 6-0. Item 12.
First reading, an ordinance of the City of Sioux Falls, South Dakota, declaring certain real property of the city surplus and authorizing the disposition thereof.
Good evening, Chad Heavey with the Engineering Division. In 2010, we reconstructed a portion of 57th Street from Minnesota Avenue to the east to what is Pembroke Circle. And you can see on your map up here, Pembroke Circle or Pembroke Avenue is the last road on the east that runs south of 57th Street. So you have Heatherwood Circle and then Pembroke Circle. During the project, we upgraded utilities, we reconstructed the street, we improved sight distances, and then we eliminated a conflict point. And this conflict point was at the intersection of 57th Street and Heatherwood Circle. And if you look at the map on this picture, you can see that Heatherwood Circle runs straight north into 57th Street. And there was a conflict point there with that intersection and then Wildwood Circle coming from the north. So when you wanted to make a left-hand turn on Heatherwood Circle, you always had to pay attention not only to the traffic on 57th, but then traffic coming out of Wildwood potentially making a left turn. So there was a conflict point there. And during the project, we eliminated that. So we purchased the land there that you see in yellow, and we purchased that land for $90,000. We realigned the intersection and thus eliminated that conflict point. And at the time, we paid $90,000 for that land. This is an updated picture, and you can see that the road has been realigned, and then it lines up with Wildwood Circle on the north. The city no longer needs that land that's highlighted in yellow, and this is the first reading to declare that property as surplus. The property has been appraised at $35,000. The recommendation is to dispose of that property using sealed bids, and then following the receipt of those bids, we will bring a recommendation back to the City Council on what if we should dispose of that land.
Thank you, Chad. Council, yes, Councilor Anderson Jr.
Chad, with the size of those two pieces of land, what could be built there? Anything?
No, we won't. We won't allow access onto 57th Street. So the amount of interested buyers will probably be one, probably two, and maybe a third. And so, it's probably going to be a grassy area where trees are planted. It originally was part of the property that's south. I don't know if it's the old Morel Mansion or what it's called. It originally was a part of that. And so I would think that somebody on the south side of that 57th Street is probably going to want it to plant trees to kind of buffer themselves from 57th Street. So the reason we'd want to use sealed bids, there's always a cost associated with doing an auction, and with the amount of interested buyers, maybe two or three, we feel this is the way to proceed.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Councilor Karski.
Do we have a minimum on the sealed bid, Chad?
There is a state law that governs how we will go ahead and approve the sale. And so I think what we'll do is once the bids come in, we'll evaluate that, compare that to state law, and then make a recommendation whether we should proceed. If we feel like we've received an offer that we should accept, then we have to bring the sale of the land back to you. And if we don't, then we'll try a different method potentially.
Who's maintaining the property now, mowing,
We are.
etc.? We are?
Yep.
Okay.
As part of the project, it was seeded and then fertilized and sprayed, and they've been on us throughout the last couple of years to keep the weeds down, and the Parks Department has done that. And so, and then we have received interest that, at least one or two maybe want to take that over for us. So.
Chad, thank you. Council, would anybody want to set a date of hearing and second reading for Tuesday, November 12th for this item?
So moved, Karski.
Second, Entman.
Counselor Karski's made that motion, seconded by Counselor Entman. Roll call vote, please.
Counselors Karski,
Yes.
Staggers,
Yes.
Aguilar,
Yes.
Anderson,
Yes.
Entman,
Yes.
Erpenbach.
Yes.
Thank you. That is passed 6-0. Item 13.
A resolution authorizing the mayor to enter into Amendment 1 to the Highway and Street Jurisdictional Exchange Agreement between the State of South Dakota and the City of Sioux Falls.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. Mark Cotter with the Office of Public Works. Tonight I also have Joel Junt with me. He's from Pierre with the Department of Transportation. He's the Director of Engineering and Planning. We have a very key item to bring you tonight, a key amendment to an existing agreement that the state and the city signed back in 2005. And I'd like to take you through some prepared comments. Joe will also speak, and then we'll be here to answer your questions. Essentially, this amendment that's in front of you by resolution restates the state of South Dakota's commitment to constructing South Dakota 100 and providing funding for the city to complete a portion of Highway 42 that is on the eastern edge of our city. As I stated in 2005, the state and the city did sign an agreement to transfer the state highways that were primarily inside the city. A portion of them are shown on that slide. Essentially, Minnesota Avenue went north and south. At Benson Road, jogs over to Cliff Avenue. And then Highway 42, east-west. Selective improvements were made, and ultimately the state of South Dakota was motivated all across the state to remove their highway segments that were inside city limits. Their role is really to connect cities and ultimately connect states together. The majority of the individual projects that were listed out in that original agreement that was signed back in 2005, it's a lengthy agreement, have been completed. The projects that are very visible that most of us have talked about in recent that are either completed or under construction are Marion Road Interchange, North Cliff Avenue, essentially from the street division all the way north, including the project that's under construction this year. West Avenue last year from Russell Street south to the Burnside intersection. Russell Street, a portion of that funding that's under construction this year and next year came from the jurisdictional agreement. South Dakota 100 that has been constructed prior to this and that's currently under construction, that green portion that is shown. By the end of this year, it will have been constructed from Arrowhead Parkway south to 57th, and then the City of Sioux Falls ultimately has that piece that's labeled partially completed. The state has remained committed, but without a long-term federal funding bill, they have not been in a position to make whole in the timeframes that are in the original agreement. One of the things that's noted in the original agreement is that the corridor that we commonly call SD 100 was originally estimated at about $72 million. Today's construction cost that we estimate to complete it will surpass $200 million. The amendment does focus on making the connection to I-90, which is essentially there in purple. It would go from I-90 south to Madison Street and allow this entire north-south section, which is really where our growth is, from essentially Sycamore Avenue out to the river to have the backbone transportation system in place. The city is responsible for 1 mile of the 17-mile corridor. It's that section that's noted. We did move forward and complete half of that, and ultimately the commitment in the amendment that's in front of you requires us to complete the other half prior to the state making the connection to I-90. We essentially want this to be a functional corridor, and so we've started in our state funding that we receive from the state each year. We've put that in our work plan to make sure that that is completed and timed out well. The future South Dakota 100 will be the backbone of the city's transportation system as we develop the next 23,000 acres that will be our growth area. Essentially, in 2006, the large sanitary sewer system The large lift stations and trunk sewers were opened up, and that first phase of development that opened 9,000 acres is well under development. The Dolly Farm Village, and now a lot of land that is east of Highway 11 is under construction and under development. SD 100 is a 6-lane, high-volume, limited-access expressway that will move traffic efficiently and safely. South Dakota 100 closely mirrors I-229 and starts essentially at I-90, an exit 402, commonly called the Arrows exit, and terminates on I-29, exit 73, that's commonly called the T exit. Today, half of SD 100, again, is constructed from Madison Street down to Arrowhead Parkway, and by the end of this year, it will be completed from Arrowhead Parkway down to 57th Street. The 23,000 acres that are yet to be developed will not realize their full potential until SD 100 is connected to I-90. Once the key connection's in place, we expect to see a significant amount of investment along SD 100, which for the commitment that we would take over in this amendment would generate millions of dollars in property and sales tax revenues to not only the city but various government entities. The city continues to see strong development east of the city, and a good transportation system is certainly critical to making sure we have good managed growth. About a year and a half ago, Mike Cooper, Darren Smith, area land owners, and myself did go to Pierre, met with the Department of Transportation and the Governor's Office to approach the state to better understand what was really their challenges with living up to their commitment to ultimately construct SD 100. The state was very open to us and said certainly without a long-term funding bill, they were in preservation mode, which essentially means that they're investing only in the lane miles that are currently in service, because they didn't want to not only put on more capital outlay and have to maintain more roads. And so as we came back, had a number of discussions, we did propose to the state that the state said that they would be in a position to advance necessary funds to construct and complete the connection from Madison to I-90 if the city would support the transfer of ownership ultimately to take over the maintenance of this corridor, essentially once it's constructed and completed and open for traffic from I-90 down to 57th Street. So that's the real difference with what this amendment does. The transfer of ownership includes taking over the operation and maintenance from I-90 to 57th Street based on preliminary timelines that have been forecasted out. In the amendment, the first project would go in from Madison to Maple Street. That would be let in 2015. From Maple to Rice Street would be let in 2016. And from Rice Street to I-90 would be let in 2017. We would expect that last section, which is one of the most difficult sections to do, with 2 railroad bridges to build, a bridge over a wide floodplain, and then ultimately a new interchange. That's the most expensive and also the most challenging. That's why we expect that to take at least 2 years. The state remains committed to the southern portion, which is shown in yellow, but to have some clarity and some focus in this amendment, the existing language that's in the existing agreement still stands, that they are committed to preserving the right-of-way and ultimately constructing that piece. We wanted to have some focus in this Amendment 1, and we only really speak to the revised timelines in going north to I-90. I-29 opened 44 years ago, or I-229 opened 44 years ago. It made a significant impact on the city of Sioux Falls at the time. In some of the old original aerials, no development was really a mile to the west of I-229, and now it's several miles now east. SD 100 will potentially do the same thing, if not more, for generations to come. I would like to bring forward Joel Gent to share some comments from the state perspective, and then we're here to answer your questions.
Welcome, Joel. Thanks for coming to Sioux Falls.
Thank you, Mayor. It's a privilege to be here to speak with you on this issue and members of the council. Mark, I think, explained very well kind of what we're looking at. I wouldn't mind just spending a little bit of time on the history and why we got where we did back in 2005. And really, one of the major things that we were looking at is our state highways that are in communities such as Sioux Falls, Rapid City, to get out of the locals, allow you to have control of that facility, whether it's the operation of the signals, the accesses, and those types of things. And so that was one of our key goals. Another key goal that we were looking at doing was focusing on our highways instead of the streets in the way that traffic flows in and around. So thus the East Side Corridor, which is discussed as South Dakota 100, as well as stimulating the economy. Looking at having another major thoroughfare in and around Sioux Falls was an economic development potential. I'm not going to get into the different highways. I think Mark did an excellent job of pointing those out. Highway 42, 115, and 38 were really those sections that you took over ownership. You took over ownership of the traffic signals, including those that intersect the interstate system on the different ramps that we have. You also took over ownership of the surfaces, the pavement markings, the access management, utilities, and last but not least, the snow removal, which you would have had anyway, because any state route that's going through this size of a community, you folks agreed to take over the snow maintenance. In that agreement, we also provided you $25 million to utilize on these sections that I've just talked about to reconstruct them, to provide the surface maintenance or whatever. To date, all of those funds have been obligated, and you've spent most of those, but in essence, they've all been obligated, and that part is complete. Of the corridor that we have, I think it's very important for us to understand why do we need to amend the agreement now? What things are happening with us? Well, from the 2005 original agreement, there was a lot of things that changed. The conditions changed significantly. One big issue was the federal funds. As you remember, the economy kind of went south, and there was a lot of things that dominoed into that. The federal government, in essence, says, here's how much money you're going to be receiving for the next year. Part of that issue was when Safety Lou was expiring, they rescinded $102 million from the state of South Dakota. So the money that was there on the books, in essence, that money got wiped out clean. Safety Lou was also expiring. That is the bill that is before us that tells us what rules and regulations we have to adhere to in order to spend those federal dollars. Anytime you're using federal dollars, as you folks know, you've got to go through the different steps, whether it's a NEPA step with the environmental process or right away or whatever. So MAP 21, they extended that another 9 times. So there was definitely uncertainty that was going on with that. At the same point in time, our state revenues took a nosedive also. We went through some pretty hard cuts on our own side, as well as the money that we had in the bank on our trusts to spend on highways decreased significantly. So we were dealing with the state issue. During this whole time where money was being less and less, construction costs increased significantly. Between 2005 to 2009, we saw prices overall to do the work that we had in 2005 increased 25 to 30%. As Mark identified earlier, this whole corridor was supposed to cost us $72 million. We're up over in the $200 million now. And probably the last reason to amend the agreement was one of the primary reasons what we were trying to do was to get the state out of your local roads, state highways. This corridor, as shown and proposed, it really will function more as a city street and not as a state highway. Again, as Mark explained, state highways gets people from one end of the state to another or tie into other states. This corridor primarily will see traffic in and around City of Sioux Falls and some of the other outlying communities, but it really will serve as a city street. So with that, I think I'm going to end and be available for questions.
Joel, thank you. Thanks for the openness and the honesty, too. And don't leave. There will be some questions, I'm sure. Mark, did you have any other comments?
I think just last comment, we really do believe it's critical that we get SD 100 constructed, because the longer we wait, the more tax that we put on I-229, and ultimately the more traffic we put on there if we overcapacity that corridor. It's just going to create more delays for drivers. It's critical for us to get this in, and we knew that with the uncertainty that the state faces, we needed to reopen up this agreement, and ultimately that's why we're bringing this forward for your consideration.
Thank you, Mark. Folks, this is a resolution. You actually have the opportunity to engage the council on this if you'd like. Would anybody in the audience want to come up and speak to the council about this? Very good, very good. Council, yes, Councilor Karski.
And I don't know if this is for Mark or for Joel, but you had made the comment that from 2005 to 2009, the cost of construction went up 40%, 30, 40%, okay, 30%. I'm looking at the numbers here, and we're going out 5, 6 years, 7 years out to 2019, 2020, and estimating some numbers. Are those based on current dollars? What happens if it's 50% more then? How does that affect this agreement? Who comes up with the additional money?
Right now, what the agreement states is the DOT will construct this road from 42 to I-90 based on whatever the costs, escalation, whatever occurs with that.
Okay, so it's just an estimated number, and really it's more about getting it done versus what it's going to cost.
Yes, sir. Let's talk about federal funding just on a little bit. From the appropriation side of the equation, it expired September 30th. So we're waiting, just like everybody else, for Congress to do something. We are anticipating we're going to receive the same amount of federal funds that we have in the past. The commitment that we have right now on the amendment is that we will construct this north section. Right now, what we have in our State Transportation Improvement Program, our 4-year construction program, is 2 projects in there. It goes from Madison to Maple, and then from Maple to Rice Street. By this amendment, in essence, we will kick the last project into the program, as well as moving those up an entire year for each one of those. There's a number of things we have to get completed, and the first big thing, is you know, especially on the Sioux Falls Railroad, is the environmental document. There wasn't a document out there, and it needs to be amended based on some things that we have near the structure that's going to have to overhead power line and those types of things. So we're hoping, I guess our anticipation is we're going to receive the same amount of federal funds. If it's somewhere close to that, yes, we are committed to build this section to the Interstate 90.
And Joel and Mark, just to simplify it for Councilor Karski and the people of Sioux Falls, the contract really is about who is responsible for building it and who is responsible for maintaining it after it's built. Is that correct?
That's correct, Mayor.
Okay. And again, to simplify that, the DOT will build it. The city of Sioux Falls will ultimately maintain it.
That's correct. Right now, the estimate to construct that purple section is just under $60 million. And that would be the DOT's cost.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, Joel, please come forward.
Mayor, if I may, and the part of the ownership and the maintenance, you would not take over ownership and maintenance until we completed that section on I-90.
Yes.
So as we're completing these other ones, we would be responsible to maintain those, and when we got the last section at I-90 done and everything else was completed, then you would take over maintenance to 57th Street.
And before the council asks that, and I know they will, just I know it's a gut, just an estimate on that, Joel, pie in the sky guess on when you think that would occur?
Yes, the last project is in there would be 2017, anticipating at least a 2-year construction, so 2018, 2019, somewhere in there.
Great job, Councilor Karski. Thank you. Yes, Councilor Buck.
Thank you. Question, Mark. Talk about, first of all, who maintains 229? Is that a state maintenance thing? You guys plow it and fix it and whatever. Okay.
Mark, would you just answer that for the people of Sioux Falls?
Yeah, that is on the interstate system, and so the DOT has ownership of that.
So then talk about how South Dakota 100 is a city street with limited access. Does it look kind of like 229 when it's done, so you can only get on it certain ways?
It does. It does look like it won't travel as fast as it does. Essentially, the section that's north and south, we've talked about this as more in the commercial area. That'll have access points at every half mile. And then on the southern section, which runs more east-west, that'll have access points every mile. It is a 6-lane facility, so 3 lanes in each direction. The other difference that is, I think, a nice enhancement for our community and different than 229 is they'll also have a large, wide shared use trail, bike trail, next to it. On the sections that are out there today, that's installed, and it will be installed with this typical section as well.
Okay. One other question, if I might, Mr. Mayor. I just want to talk about that cost of maintenance in terms of snow removal in particular. We've said it's from I-90 to 57th Street. How many miles is that? And can you guess, what does that cost us to plow 6 lanes that many miles?
Well, again, that's already going to be our cost, whether we take over the ownership or not, because inside, that's an agreement that we have to maintain the signals and snow removal, so I didn't calculate that. Essentially, to maintain a 1-mile segment of a 6-lane road over a 40-year typical life will cost the city about $4.7 million in today's dollars. And that will be what I would say will be a fraction of the cost with the amount of investment that will be made in these, ultimately, these 23,000 acres that are being opened up for development.
Right, great, thank you.
Councilor Stangers.
Yes. I was curious about, once we get the highways, we become responsible for the highways, how much liberty do we have in maybe making changes in the highway? What I'm referring to is what happened on West 12th Street. We're responsible for West 12th Street, but the city council didn't want to have that, didn't want to have the median, that's right, the median, but we were overruled on that. And so now we're in charge of West 12th. Can we just simply say we want to get rid of that median now?
This section of roadway would be utilizing federal funds. And anytime you utilize federal funds, you have to dot the I's, cross the T's, and ensure that you're following those requirements. This section would be acquired with, I believe, partial control of access. So those accesses will, there would be, their plat, whoever we acquire right away, on their plat would say your access is at this point and this point. Now, you have the opportunity to change that after construction is done, but the federal highway would, in essence, have you identify how much you paid for that, and by relinquishing that access that you paid for, they may require you to pay it back.
Okay. So we actually do have some freedom if we desire to exercise it.
And I think the key, Mayor, if I may, the key to that is ensuring that those federal regulations, I lost my train of thought. Yes, if you want to continue to have those routes be able to utilize federal funds, you need to continue on with those regulations. If you decide that we're going to do this and we don't want to use any more federal funds on it, whether it's on doing concrete repair or whatever, that decision is yours.
Okay.
Fascinating. Thank you. Councilor Anderson, Jr.
Question for Mark. Mark, what you may not be able to provide the information tonight, but well, I think that would be interesting to see. What roads right now are we maintaining under, state roads that we're maintaining at this time, and what's the cost, annual cost of that maintenance?
You're right. I'm not going to be able to speak to what those costs are, but essentially, this graphic shows the blue roads are the interstate system. That's on the screen. And then at one point in time, prior to this agreement, Highway 42 was under the jurisdiction of the state. They essentially, at the time, and this predates me, evaluated the roads and they brought them up to standards in respective areas. Now, there were areas that we've had to make investments on, like Minnesota Avenue, for example. And at the time, because I've asked the question as well, that road was in much better shape when we signed the agreement than it was just in the last couple years. And so that's ultimately one of those situations that you face anytime you take over a roadway system. But over time, those pavements have also gotten extended, certainly a long life. But, I mean, I would be, we can certainly put together some level of costs, but I don't know exactly how accurate it would be, since we didn't have the full jurisdiction from day one all the way through to today of what it takes, right? Because some of these we're just starting to take over. So some of them, in a sense, we're just doing some tech-create operations. I just don't know if it's going to be a reflective cost that's going to maybe answer your question.
Or Mark, maybe just to help, or Chad, to help Councilor Anderson Jr. and all the people of Sioux Falls, maybe just give us an estimate on a mile's worth of repair on a 4-lane road. Let's talk about repair. What would, just give us a gut on that? And let's just say it's joint repair, potholes, and give us your gut on that, and then a mile of replacement.
On the repair, I'd like to come back on that one, because that can vary anything from just essentially resealing the joints,
okay,
to tech-create, to ultimately full joint and spall repair. Wide range. Now, on a typical mile of pavement, Chad, do you want to share what maybe a recent bid has been on a mile of concrete pavement?
Chad, I said gut. We're not going to hold you to it, but I think from the people of Sioux Falls and the council, I think it's a fair question.
I think just in large numbers, if we were talking a mile of 4-lane pavement, we're probably talking in that, $4 to $5 to maybe $5.5 million range, and a lot's going to depend on what else has got to be brought up to standards as far as drainage and other utilities. But we can go back and look at maybe the last 3 or 4 large projects we've done. Minnesota Avenue was, 19 million as an example, but there was a lot to do with that. So we can bring that back to you in more detail. I meant Russell. What did I say?
Minnesota.
Wow.
Also maybe share with them Kiwanis. Kiwanis is a good, I think, example. It's not a mile long.
Yeah, Kiwanis Avenue right now went from a 4-lane facility to mostly a 5-lane facility from about 10th up to 2nd. There was some other concrete repairs, and it was just over $2 million. So a lot depends on what's got to be done.
Councilor Karski.
One more question, Mark, and it kind of struck me when I was looking at the map. That purple section of road, it's not in city limits. I can't imagine we do a lot of maintenance on roads that are outside of city limits. Do we have any standards or anything to go by when we're going to own a road basically that's not even in town, and with no projected annexation, that type of thing?
Well, it's certainly in our growth area, our future growth area. So it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. And we've got certainly guidelines that we would go by. Essentially to maintain a road like this, and Chad and his team worked out and reached out to area DOT. So we had a good assessment if we were to take this on, what amount of cost would this bring to the city. But essentially they initially, you're essentially resealing the joints every 6, 12, and 18 years. And then in about a year 24, 25, you're going in and doing any joint and spall repair. And then on about year 32, you're going to put a thick asphalt overlay on it to get it to a 40-year life. Now, there are pavements that are maintained that have lasted longer than that. Russell Street, an example, was over 50 years old. And so, but we want to be conservative. Also, the bridges nowadays have a life cycle of at least 75 years. And so we believe that that's a conservative number, but it's something that with all of our growth and development, lower speed, controlled access, that it's something that we're willing to take on.
Councilor Anderson Jr.
Now the question I forgot. Mark, or our state official. This amendment here is because of missing federal funds. If those, let's say the federal government actually does something and gets running again, and those federal funds are restored, are we going to come back to this issue and revisit that? Or will those funds be utilized in ways that will assist us in, recouping what we're going to be spending in maintenance?
Did you guys spend? federal funds on your maintenance activity? On the construction part, definitely yes. There are different treatments that are eligible to utilize federal funds on it, but for snowplow maintenance and pavement marking and those types of things, we use state funds on those, and I'm assuming the city uses the same thing on that. Your city dollars on the.
Councilor, is your question more to if the federal government actually provides a long-term funding bill, which we don't expect is going to happen in the short term, but if they were to give a long-term funding bill, would we revisit this and maybe not take over the maintenance? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
You really have an issue on, state maintenance dollars. I think maybe share why you're trying to get out of that business.
Yeah, the big thing for us when we entered into this agreement again was two things. One, giving local control back to the locals that these routes go through your city, and two, when kind of the bottom fell out, we in essence went to preservation mode. And not only was this project, but we had numerous projects throughout the state that we stopped working on, period. And we really went into preserving our existing system and trying to maintain it to the level that we thought our citizens expected. So having to add more sections or routes to maintain is really something that we're trying to avoid. And we are doing this in other communities. For example, the city of Rapid City, if you've ever driven down Main and St. Joe, those routes used to be Old Highway 79. They are now city streets. A number of the East North Street was part of that, and a number of old state highways became city streets because as the city grows, really they don't serve and function as a state highway anymore. It functions more as a city street. So that was preserving our existing system and taking that section and giving it to the locals were primarily what we were looking after.
Okay, and if I may continue, we were talking about like access points for businesses and things like that. I see like on West 12th Street, there's a lot of times, and now on North Cliff, as we construct North Cliff Avenue, that we're dictating to businesses what access points they can have. Now, is that through state rules or is that Sioux Falls rules?
It's actually a joint access study.
If I may, Mayor, let's talk Cliff for just a minute. That was a section that is to turn over to you folks once we're done completing it at the interchange with 90. That was a joint decision by the city and the state of where those accesses would be, but there are also federal requirements that you cannot have an access so close to an interchange ramp. So there's all three of them. And I believe that we have a fantastic working relationship with city staff here and the DOT, and we have very good communications. And access and all of those things are things that we try to work out and agree upon ahead of time.
Okay, thank you.
Mayor,
Yes, Mark?
I think with access is always a key issue. I think just the density of the Dolly Farm development, I think, is a really good example of when you lay out an access management plan and ultimately you design your developments to it. That's a section where a quarter mile back from on Highway 42, they have one primary access into that area down at 18th Street, and then they'll have another one off 26th Street. And there's internal roundabouts, there's large intersections, and ultimately it's safer. And so, and then there's a discussion on consistency. So, I mean, those access points work, and we're really trying to lay out so ultimately we can have essentially an expressway that can move a lot of traffic safely. And the key thing to that is to actually really have a good sense of control in your access points.
Just to comment back on that, it's just that is nice for areas that are under new construction, but where we have existing businesses, West 12th Street, Cliff Avenue. I hope that we do really, work with those businesses, especially on their access points, because I've heard a lot from businesses about access points being restricted to them that they feel are necessary for them to operate their business.
No, that's fair.
Very good. Well, Council, just great discussion, and really appreciate the due diligence on this. And Joel, again, welcome to Sioux Falls. Thanks so much for the partnership. It is a strong one. Mark, great job. Council, I'm going to leave this in your hands. Any thoughts, any motions?
Move to approve, Entenmann.
Second, Karski.
Councilor Entenmann has made a motion to approve this resolution, and it was seconded by Councilor Karski. If there is no further discussion, roll call vote, please.
Councilors Karski?
Yes.
Staggers?
Yes.
Aguilar?
Yes.
Anderson?
Yes.
Intiman?
Yes.
Urbanbach?
Yes.
Thank you. That is passed 6-0. Item 14.
A resolution amending the 2013-2017 capital program to add a washing machine.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. Dave Fisher, Assistant Director, Parks and Recreation. This resolution will revise our 2013 other capital equipment program to allow us to purchase a commercial-grade washing machine for the Sioux Falls Stadium to be used by the Canaries to wash uniforms. The funding of approximately $9,000 will come from savings that we've already realized in our other capital equipment program as a result of other equipment that we've already purchased at less than budgeted for prices. The washer is the city's responsibility to replace, as stated in the Canaries lease, with the city that was initiated in 1999. And with that, I'd like to answer any questions.
Before I go to Councilor Sayers, anybody in the audience want to speak to this washing machine item? Very good. Councilor Staggers.
Yeah, I got a phone call from somebody today saying, how can you spend $9,000 on a washing machine? How can you spend $9,000?
The commercial grade level of this machine is what puts it in that category. If you can imagine washing however many players they have uniforms, and on an everyday basis, that's what they cost.
Yeah, but it's not every day.
The other thing to know is that because it's in the OSEP program, that it would also be bid.
So it could be more?
Could be more. I don't think that'll be the case.
Councilor Anderson Jr.
Dave, when does the contract run out for that stadium?
Their lease runs out December 31st of 2019, but they also have two options, 5-year options to extend after that point in time.
When was the last contract done?
The contract was originally done in 1999, and it was amended in 2009.
May I ask one more question, just to show how some of these contracts can get a little out of control? If we name that stadium, if, let's say, another donor comes up and wants their name on that stadium, and they pay $5 million for having their name put on that stadium, where does that money go?
Actually, naming rights for the stadium are also dictated in the agreement.
So where do they go?
To the Canaries, I believe. Don't quote me on that. They have
right.
naming rights.
I know the answer to that.
Okay,
you
they
are
have,
right.
They have
I just
naming
wanted
rights.
to show what that contract is.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And again, the year of that was 2009. Thank you.
1999.
Good job, Councilor.
Move to approve, Entenmann.
Second, Urbanbach.
Well, very good. Thank you. Councilor Entenmann, thank you for making that motion. Thank you, Councilor Bach, for seconding it. Councilor Staggers, yes, comment.
I'm just going to say that I'm voting against this because we can get cheaper washing machines, very simply.
Okay.
Thank you, sir. Very good. Roll call vote, please.
Councilors Karski?
Yes.
Staggers?
No.
Aguilar?
Yes.
Anderson?
No.
Intiman?
Yes.
Urbanbach?
Yes.
That is passed 4-2. Thank you. Council, good meeting tonight. Any other comments before we adjourn? A motion to adjourn, please.
So moved, Aguilar.
Anderson.
Councilor Aguilar would like this meeting to end tonight, and I thank you for that. It was seconded by Councilor Anderson Jr. It was a great meeting. All those in favor say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed, nay. This meeting is adjourned, Sioux Falls. Thanks so much for watching us, and thanks for being here in attendance. Make it a great night.